We're here today with Janet Sternburg, and I'm Bailey Mizell, the director of PATH LA. Just a quick intro on Janet Sternburg. Janet is a fine art photographer, a writer of literary books, a maker of theater and films, and an educator. Characterized as the work of a visual poet, her photography has also been written about extensively in essays by art historians and philosophers, cultural critics, poets, and artists from other disciplines. A monograph of her photographs, Overspilling World, the Photographs of Janet Sternburg, was published in 2016-17 by Distanz Verlag, with essays and commentary by Wim Wenders, Pepe Carmel, and Catherine Opie. She's exhibited solo exhibitions both nationally and internationally, including New York, Los Angeles, Berlin, Milan, Munich, Mexico, and Korea. In 2021, work from I've Been Walking was included in International Center Photography's ICP Concerned Global Images for Global Crisis exhibition. And Sternberg pioneered in the use of disposable cameras to create images in which elements interpenetrate, a visual and imaginative world without borders. Again, at any point during the presentation, please feel free to add your questions and comments in the chat and Q&A. I'll be looking over those, and we'll have a conversation with Janet following her presentation. And Janet, I'd like to pass it to you now.
With pleasure, Bailey. Thank you. Thank all the members of the PAC LA board. Hello to my friends, and hello to those of you who I will hope to meet someday. As Bailey said, I am going to be talking about the new book, but in order to do that, I have to go back. And I have to, not because of chronology, but because in this presentation, I want to share with you a progression of seeing and thinking that has informed my work and has made changes in the new book. So we're going to go back to 1998. Yes, I am a late life photographer. I started in middle age, and I'm so happy that I did. But you should know that this photograph, which is a crop, I might add, started with walking, as in I've been walking. And what had happened is I finished a book. I'd been immersed in the past. I looked up, the book was on its way in the world, and I couldn't see the present. I couldn't see what was around me, and that's a huge loss, just huge. So I decided to put myself into a situation where I could see, which was going to Mexico, where I have a second home, and walking without any goal, no destination, suspending myself. I came to a window in town and I stopped, and suddenly I said to myself, I want to take a photograph. I dashed to the town square, which then only had a disposable, a throwaway, a single-use camera. And when I got that photograph developed, I'm sure some of you here remember when the wait between the taking and the seeing of your picture, I discovered something. That was a surprise. It's that man on the roof, more or less upper left center, because I had not seen him when I took the photograph. And I began to understand at that point how the limitations of the disposable could become assets and let me see in a different way. And what I mean by that is when a camera doesn't have adjustable focus, when there is no depth of field, there are certain things you cannot do. You cannot say, oh, I like this and put it into sharp focus. I don't like that, and then use softer focus to make it recede. Disposable can't do that. And so everything in the frame becomes of interest. And that included the hammering man who was actually behind me on the street. Everything becomes part of the picture. And because there's no depth of field, everything appears on a single which hard word to say, interpenetrating image within the frame. Now, I'd like to move on from this. I should add this one now is in the permanent collection of the USC Fisher Museum, which makes me happy. And we're going to move to this one, which is Stream. And I'm going to go through a few that will just show you how the work has developed in the pretty much early years of it. And this one's been in a lot of shows. It's had a lot of exposure. And let me decode it, which I don't ordinarily do, but I think I should here. I am standing on a street, on a sidewalk in Mexico. I'm looking into a window in which there is a painting, quite small, of a mesa, and you see the mesa in the distance there, and the stream, and you surely see the stream. And parked on the near side of the street is a Volkswagen bus. And then on the opposite side of the street, behind me, there's that yellow scalloped wall, and that encloses a nunnery. And behind that is a stand of trees. However, the space, a space which you could use to cross the street ordinarily, has collapsed into interpenetrating layers. Now, I want to take a moment to, it sounds like I'm going to change the subject, I'm not. At this point, I would like to tell you that the greatest gift of being a late life photographer is freedom. It's something you don't even hear an internal voice saying, you can't do that. And so I fell in love with blur, but I also embraced blur to question. And this is little by little as things go on, but the key question for me is, where in our minds is there a clear boundary between front and back, solid and fluid, inside and outside? I believe that our minds are porous. So here are a few more images that should show you that. Yes, very early. And I should tell you right now, there's no superimposition. There's no double exposure. There's no Photoshop. I don't manipulate. I have nothing against it. On the contrary, I often admire it in others. And I don't have a technological, kind of, oh no, I can't do that. No, I've simply got interested in what is there for the seeing, if I find a way, as I have, to see it in my own way. So let's go to another one. Yes. And obviously you can tell here that I work with reflection, but I want to make a point that's important to me. I love the reflection work of Atje and of Lee Friedlander, to name just a few. They let you see what is in front of them, and often you get a partial view of what's behind them. And in viewing, you know where you are. In my world of reflection, you don't know where you are. I want to meld what are usually separate dimensions so that they mingle on a single plane. And let me see, there was supposed to be one other one, but who knows? Nope, didn't. I'm going to go back because I would like you to see that other one. Well, it decided not to show its face. This did, and this is where I'm going next. And it is a further development in the way I thought about work. This is a full building installation at the Seoul as in Korea, Institute of the Arts. And I was asked to inaugurate their new art and media building, which was designed to be multi-dimensional. And indeed, as you can see, my work is multidimensional, so it was a very good match. And I did several things that I just want to tell you about briefly. The side, the glass that you see on the side is a 3-story glass facade. And I found a way, working with a wonderful projection person, Ed Perver, to take 2 of my images, you can't see it very well here, but you can imagine it, I hope, and make them adhere side by side to those 3 stories. And it included the door so that people could walk through my images, which I got a big kick out of. And now, yes, here is a piece of the inside. As you can see on one side, there's conventional framing, but that screen, which goes very far down with its LED image monitors right in the center. What we did with that, I took about 60 of my images and I arranged them in very, very different orders. And they appear on each face of the screen. So if you choose, you can just look at one face, but then opposite it was a long bleacher. And so if you looked at the entire thing moving in front of you, it really felt like a kind of choreography. And so once again, good things happened that pushed me further in my thinking and in my seeing to 2016. That's a big jump. And that's when a book of mine was published, as Bailey said. And you might want to know why the title, because it's essential to how I think. It's a quote that I'm going to read you from a book on Merleau-Ponty, the French philosopher. This is sort of old wise, but hey. What living perception offers us comes overflowing with half-hidden things that overlap, hide, allude to other things. And then he goes on to say, amid an overspilling world. And you can see what the book designer, Lorraine Weil, did with the cover, because even the title overspills. And we are going to another jump 2 years later to 2018, when, well, you'll just hear what happened there, but it was a big thing for me. And I was given the opportunity to come up with the concept for a show at the, again, USC Fisher Museum of Art. And I found the concept, which was, well, really required kind of where, what, who, and I found it in a book by the philosopher Jane Bennett. And in I've Been Walking, there's a conversation between Jane and me at the end. But at this point in time, I had not known much about her, but I was looking at one of her books and I saw a word that jumped out at me because I'd never seen it before. The word is limbus. And it became the title of the show, as you can see in this picture of the entrance there. Briefly about that, Jane mentions it in relation to the 16th century, to Paracelsus, the alchemist, and many other things. And he used it to talk about a hem, as in a hem, between body and spirit, and a kind of way of becoming from one to the other. But I had no idea, did this word limbus mean anything at all now? And I looked it up, and it does. If you were at this moment to look, well, don't, but just wait later to look at your eyeball, you will see around the very, very far edge of the eye where it's base white, there's a ring. And that ring is the limbus. And so, of course, it was exciting because all these centuries later, it meant something that had to do with seeing and with vision. But then I hit pay dirt. I really mean that, because I found out about something that was only discovered about 20 years ago, and that is that the limbus is the home of stem cells that maintain the cornea of the eye. And they do it as their regular way of being, but if the cells of the cornea are damaged, they cross their limbus border and they restore and they replenish, which seemed to me to be just a totally wonderful idea. And in fact, I'm writing about it now. I continue to write. That will always be part of me. And I'm working on a book that will have images and images and text about that. Anyway, here is what I did for that show. And this is a partial view, obviously, but these are 72 inches high and approximately 52 inches wide. There is no mat, there is no glass, there is simply the thinnest of aluminum frames, so that the images you're seeing are all printed on a single piece of paper, on which I and the printer, Evans Weinberg, I just think is great, made a limbus. But we didn't do it by superimposing. Instead, Evans found a way to take the image and feather it out so that it's surrounded in the way the eyeball is surrounded with its own limbus. And then I wanted to find a way to visualize those stem cells, and I did. I think it was a tad obscure, but I think it was good anyway. But the idea of it was to pick a section of, yes, a section of an image, and not even a section, a little part of it, and have it cross its own border. And those are the leaves on the top, that little section. I hope you can see it because something just descended onto my frame, but I believe you can. And they are crossing the limbic border. And I just want to tell you something at this point. It was a public program as part of this show, and a professor of border studies, Juan de Lara at USC, found something that I've always felt, and that is a political, not an activist, but a political part of my work. And I'm going to read you what he wrote from his remarks. Sternberg's photos are methodological interventions because they insist that ambiguity and complexity prevail. Her photographs represent what art historian Gavin Grindon and curator Catherine Flood have called disobedient objects, because they disrupt how we see the world. They represent radical imaginaries for what is possible. Yeah, and now we come to the new book, I've Been Walking, and here goes. That's what the cover looks like. The designer, Matthias Bayer, did something very clever on the back. He continued the image so that back is split the way this is, but it's still the one image, the continuation of this. And there's something I need to tell you right at the start. And that is all of the photographs in this book, except 6, were taken during the year of the Los Angeles lockdown. And you can imagine, I mean, it was a year, and it was a year of such intensity for everybody. First of all, I think the first time it really hit me was when, it was probably the day after, and I walked by the Bradbury building, famous from many movies, etc., and the building that's just part of Los Angeles. And I saw that it was closed. In it is that great mural, for those of you who live in Los Angeles, of Anthony Quinn dancing as Zorba the Greek. But to me, it had a lot of references, of course, highly composed. And on the one hand, it seemed like a welcome. On the other hand, it could be a blessing to the city. It could be a man on the cross. And of course, by now you know that I like multiple levels of image, ones that can't reduce to a single meaning. I love that ambiguity and complexity. And these pictures that follow were taken from an intensity of feeling. It began with sorrow at so much boarded up and so many aspirations dashed. And that touched a chord in me because when I was 16, my father lost his small grocery store and the aspirations were dashed. But it was also more than that. It was all that complex of feelings that drove me out into the street day after day in mask and gloves. And I walked Los Angeles from the northern border of the county to the southern border at Point Fermin. That's where the cover image was taken. And to a large extent in the neighborhood, which is downtown LA, Little Tokyo. So what I saw to begin with, what I really focused on and felt were images of emptiness. And here is one. And here is another. And then little by little, the emptiness was not what was prevailing. What was I seeing was human traces of human presence, even though they were absent. It was a kind of signal in the middle of the emptiness. There were somehow these traces of people. This one, I did a certain amount of, how shall we put it, trespassing. This is the Little Tokyo Mall. It was completely closed, and I walked it inside. And of course, this is the kind of playful, although the image is not a playful one, but the playful hook that descends when you put your money in and it picks something up and up it comes and it goes down into the hands of a child or whomever. But when I took this image, obviously it was never going to, well, not never, but it was surely not going to descend for a long time. And then of course I saw a somewhat beatific yellow stuffed animal at the bottom left on my screen. And then that horrific, aghast face of whatever that brown stuffed animal is on the lower right. So it's kind of a complex image. This is self-evident. I'm going to stop talking for a little bit and take you through some of them. One of the things I like, and as you can see, there aren't people in my photographs, although I'm going to come a little later to the possibility of that. But I do love objects, and I do find that they speak in their own way. And I love the sense that hovering outside the frame, there's an implicit story. And in this case, he was interrupted in the painting. And there's a question hanging in the lockdown of COVID. Will the painter return? This was the one, it's not in the book, but it was, so I thought I'd just put it here. In the exhibit that really meant I'd be concerned. This is something strange, and there are about 7 or 8 of these in the book. When I was walking, I discovered that the outside wall, emphasis outside wall, of the Caltrans building, which is quite near where I live, has niches, rather deep, and in each one, going down that wall, there are photographs. Covering those niches is glass that's been there for a while and is scraped and scratched and various things are written on it. And what I would do again and again, because I went back to those walls many times, is stand in front of an image, pick a detail, let what was behind me enter what was in front of me, which you now know is part of my practice. And it was kind of a moment in which the Caltrans images, and they were all images of disaster and of rescue, because that's what they do, but there was a sense in which the past and the moment we were living in fused. And as I said, there were more of them. that are in the book. Now, these images, like that, there's a story about that, but it can wait for later if you want to ask me. The images, you are here. Where is here on that gas tank? We'll come back to her, but these images in the book, they felt different to me. It was almost as though they had been given to me. I wasn't looking for anything. I certainly wasn't documenting Los Angeles. That's not what I do. And I do think that the images are recognizably me, in that you will find odd juxtapositions, the things that are often overlooked or unseen, and also those visual metaphors that just won't be reduced to that one meaning. I think this is one such in which, to me, it seems as though the woman with the mask and the whatever it is that's similarly covered are recognizing something in one another. There's some sort of exchange across that street. But I also, having said about how they're recognizably me, I'd like to mark some changes in this talk. I'm using a different camera. It's also low tech, but it's an iPhone 10. And means I could take sharper pictures if I wanted to. And I did, because in a world that was so desperately afraid of infection, I did not want to emphasize porosity in my images. So I didn't also, I felt very strongly that I didn't want to turn the terrible experience, excuse me, I think this is a good moment to get some water. Bear with me, it'll be a quick sip. That I didn't want to turn the losses and the griefs of COVID into artistic game. Later, when I looked at all the pictures and thought about them, I really that I hope that we are enlarged by becoming part of the landscape of all of us. And it was in that spirit I was taking these pictures, although I couldn't put words on it until later. You all know about that. Now, I also think you know Rose Shoshana of Rose Gallery, and she recently suggested a book to me that I read. It's by, again, another French philosopher. I guess I really like those people. It's Frederic Gros, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, The Philosophy of Walking. I'm going to open a little paren here to say that I'm going to be having a book signing at Rose's Gallery on November 14th. And there's going to be other things involved with it, and it's going to be very nice, I think. So you are the people, I'm sure, who will get the notice. And in that book, I came across a quote from Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And here it is: I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing, I see all. Well, there's that eyeball once again. And of course, we can't see all, we know that. But that notion of the transparent eyeball corresponded to the way in which I met the world, that meeting place between my way of seeing and the city during this time. And I'd like to turn now to something that's interested me for a very long time, and that's text and image. I've written essays about that, about books that are work with text and image, and I have a book of poetry out in which I put an image as literally the same size as a stanza and inserted into the poem. So the experience of reading was also an experience of looking. However, for this book, I knew I wanted text, and that's beyond my own introduction and beyond the end, which is the conversation and short, almost poem by Jane Bennett. And I wanted lightness, because I think text and image can really be ruined in their relationship and diminish one or the other if it's heavy with words. And these were essentially floating. They float on the white part of a page, not on anywhere on the image. They're not captions by no means. Lots of spacing between the lines, and the lines don't always perfectly align with the image. And the text is all one long sentence. Now, I should just looking and thinking that none of these, the text is illustrative, actually not all at a kind of oblique angle to the image. And sometimes I've been asked which came first, the photos or the text. Well, the answer, of course, is the photos. And I wasn't even sure that I wanted to or could generate a text. I left it to the last minute. And I wrote it, that one long sentence, without looking at the photos. And they're all about something called the edge effect. And that it actually begins with my saying, I've been held by an idea, the edge effect, which is when two habitats in ecology meet. And at the threshold of their meeting is where change happens. And that's a thought that I find both visually arresting and quite provocative and beautiful. So that goes through the entire book. And I think I might have left something out. Bear with me. No, I think I said that. Yep. Okay. And on the last pages of the book, before back matter, they're white. There's no image. And it's a double spread. And on the left side of the spread on white is the word, the edge effect. And on the other side is you and I here. I think I'll go back and show that other one a little longer because I want to. Yes, it is. Yes, it is a gutter on the actual street, and it is sunrise. Yeah. And this, of course, is an opening. It's an opening that fascinates me because the sea above is quite serene, and the same sea that you can find in the middle of those cutouts is really cool. Looks totally different. I don't know why that is, but it certainly made me cherish this image. And so for now, I think I would like to end the talking, although I have a question when I'm done, with this phrase, the edge effect. You and I here. And at this point, I'm going to say thank you for looking and listening. And I'm going to ask Bailey, do I have time now to go on briefly to a few new images that point to new directions and to your special request images?
Sure, Janet, you have time. That'd be wonderful. And thank you for your lovely presentation so far.
You are welcome. Here goes. Now, as I said, I'm going on writing, and these are all images that were taken since I took the ones for the book. So they're really quite new, and they're just a few of them, but I want to explain the direction. I'll explain. I don't like the word explain. I don't like the word about, because that pins an image like a butterfly to a wall. No, these are things that arrested my eye. And this one is very much my love of the everyday and of transforming it. These are hair swatches in a hairdresser's window. I love how monumental they are. And I am going on exploring the interpenetrating world because that fascinates me. And that word shut, I mean, this image could have been in Overspilling World because that was on a shut dress shop in Little Tokyo. But here it is. And here is another one because I'm always attracted to luminosity. You know, all photographers basically are. And this was an exciting one to find, as I'm sure you can imagine. And now I said, I don't have people in my photographs, but a few weeks ago, I was on the Mendocino coast at a park, and I saw this man and his son, and I found myself quite moved by the opposition of the child and the man on the screen. It was his father, by the child with his forehead against the wood. Now he could be looking down, but it does have a sense of he's being kind of against that forehead, against that wood. And then that finger at the bottom, which could be expressing, and it actually could be hiding. And then I saw another person, very different. That's her, little girl, love her. She's so unself-conscious. She's looking at the ocean, and she's hitching up the back of her pants. And once again, I was moved, this time by her spirit. So, oops, going to come back to that. So there is the possibility in front of me of people entering my pictures. Quien sabe? This next one is another direction I've been thinking about, and here goes. This past year, I've been meeting on past lockdown, continuing now, with a friend who, like me, is deeply interested in philosophy, and we've been reading philosophy together, and enjoying ourselves because we're really trying to do close readings, but we've been known to depart. But nonetheless, what I have learned is that those sessions, that reading has seeped into me. And I immersed this very recent photograph, and this seems to me very much about a translucent world, not a transparent one, not the world is directly in front of us, but a world in which everything, not just light, is translucent. And also there's a play in here about appearance and reality and a veil and a seeing through. So to me, as I looked at that, because of course so much of the work we all do is looking after we take the picture, seemed to me that I was on the track of something, the embodiment of philosophy without sacrificing the beauty, the composition, the world that we all love. And here is another one. And one of the things that my friend and I talked about was being, capital B. And in this one, all it is a painted wall downtown and some kind of scraggly plants. And of course, a shadow, who is me. But to me, they all come together. They come together as a kind of cosmos in which I feel a part, and that is a part along with everything else. So these are my new directions. And now there were several that Bailey particularly liked, which makes me happy. And I'm going to show those to you. And yeah. And of course, this actually, these are all in the book, I might add. And I'm sure many of you, particularly downtown, recognize the National Guard, this soldier with his wariness in his eyes, and also scared. I really felt scared coming off of him. Well, there he is, a person. This was one of the 6 I mentioned at the beginning that I took before the book, although it is in the book. And near where I live is the toy district, which is strange because so many of the windows are obscured with scratches and things inside are sort of barely there and dusty. Anyway, this one called to me, and at the top, although I can't see it in my screen sharing, but I hope you can, there's a kind of dowel in the upper left. And I think it was a temptation, and maybe other people would have cropped that out. But no, I thought, no, I want that there because the abstract of this picture, I didn't want it to remain only abstract. I wanted it to be rooted in the world. And that's something else that interests me greatly, that abstraction and reality are often go rather happily hand in hand. And this is in the book as, well, the ticket booth to which we usually, through which that little disc in the center we speak. And that wonderful abstraction at the bottom is the place where our tickets would emerge from. And again, it was closed. And yeah, I also was tremendously attracted to that ivory colored horizontal something paper that on the one hand, I'm sure has got something written on it. In fact, I once deciphered it. But because the image has a bruised quality, and because there's something quite ancient about all of that, I think of it as some sort of hieroglyph of the moment. I think this one is the last one. Yes, and who knows, maybe this is the painter who returned, although it's not that red one any longer. But of course, this is a feast of green. And now I think that is it. And I, again, thank you. I thank you for looking. I thank you for listening. And I'm happy to take any questions. And Bailey, is this the moment that I press stop share?
You can, yes. We'll
Why
hop
don't I?
Q&A and conversation.
Okay, there we are.
Janet, such a thorough presentation that you presented for us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So everyone that's here, thank you for being here with us. If you have any questions or comments for Janet, feel free to keep adding them to the chat Q&A. We had a lovely comment earlier, Janet. Someone was requesting that if we could see the images larger because they really had desire to see more detail. And I love that and concept of your large scale prints. So
well,
fun.
Thank you for saying that. And perhaps I should have done detail. And so I take that under consideration for the next time I give a talk. Yes, because one of the things that fascinates me in this, particularly in this interpenetrating work, is that it's full of passages, which is, I think, what you, whoever you are kind of yearning for, because when you get tied in on those passages, they're really quite beautiful, I think. So if you get the book, I suppose this is the moment to put a plug in, and you may take a magnifying glass, you will find all those passages for yourself.
Yes, and if anyone gets a chance to see some of Janet's installations, you do print in large scale, right? The work does come out in large scale for that exact.
Yeah, yes, I do. Scale is so interesting because there, as you know, there's been such a kind of almost a fetish in recent years, particularly thanks to the German photographers, of enormous photographs. And I've thought a lot about that. I do think that my work, by and large, looks best at 30 by 40, and that's kind of a big one. But I also think sometimes, and this is when I have time, money, whatever, to go on printing, what would it be like if some of these images were the size of a Persian miniature?
Right. We discussed this.
We did indeed. So
Yeah.
it's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Yeah. So we have a few questions coming in, but I wanted to pose one quickly to you, Janet. In the context of the act of walking, moving, getting to, coming to, can you talk about when the image does not happen? So what subject fields prompt your image making, and which ones are not involved in the collective narrative that you're designing?
Yes. Sometimes I'll see something and I'll want to take a picture and I'll circle it around and think about it. And then I go, no, it's not my territory. Somebody else could have been here. Somebody else might take that picture, by which I don't mean to be exclusive. On the contrary, it's more that I believe that every artist in any particular form or medium that you want to talk about has his or her own territory, a kind of home territory that you can recognize, like, oh, yes. And that's when I take the picture, and the other is when I do not.
Great. Thank you for engaging that for me. I was really wanting to start with that question there. So hopping to the chat here, we have one question that is, have you continued your walking practice now that we are no longer under such strict restrictions?
What a great question. And I don't want anyone here to think that I'm kind of a walking jock. I kind of wish I were. I am not. I'm more of a stroller, going slowly as I look. I've actually learned to stop because I have been known to get into accidents when my attention is elsewhere, but which it is when you stroll, it just is. And the question is such a good one because it's a yes and no. Am I still taking pictures? Like crazy. Are they when I walk? Are they in all the different ways that I take pictures? Yes. But the practice of walking, that daily insistence, has waned. And right now, what I'm thinking about is a combo, getting into my car and going places. I'm kind of intrigued with Echo Park. And during the time that it was really during the lockdown, I kind of invaded very quietly a school and took some pictures there that I thought were good, but weren't. But the point is, I want to go back, look through the car, park, and walk. So I thank whoever asked that question because it's a little goad in a good way.
Great question, Paula. We have another question here from Stephen. How do the photographs relate to your writing life?
I'm sorry, how do they look what?
How do the photographs relate to your writing life?
Oh, well, that's so many ways to answer that. I think I'll answer it for now by quoting a dialogue that happened when Bailey came to my studio. She said, do you still consider your work to be multidimensional? And I paused because I know that Bailey is also a poet. And I said, is a poem multidimensional? And I think at that moment, we understood that the poetic impulse underlies, and now I'll turn to me, everything. And it's, it's such a cruel time in the world. I don't want to imply a kind of airy ecstasy, although I've been known to go into that mode, but it's more a kind of just, I keep coming back to this word feeling. And I remember going to a lecture once by a very prominent photographer who said, oh, well, we don't think about feeling. Well, I do. And I'm sure many of you here do also. And the feeling of poetry. Well, let's say it's like a limbus that surrounds an object, a person, a world. And I think that's how it connects for
Yeah.
now.
Yes. Wonderful answer, Janet.
Thank you for your question.
Can't wait to continue conversations together. Another question that I actually had that I know that you are fond of as well is the concept of the auto portrait in your images, the reflection of self, the device of self that's present in your images. Just broadly, can you talk about that? When you make an image with yourself present, when you're not present visually?
Well, I have to confess that often I do not know that I'm there. If you were to see me, I'm bobbing and weaving, going lower down, going off to the side, so that doesn't happen. But sometimes, and it's often a very lucky happenstance, sometimes intentional, but more often than not, and certainly sometimes I'll see through the lens. When it's there, I welcome it. If it feels organic to the picture, I basically say to that self who is me, come on in, come into the picture. You can be part of it too.
Lovely. And Janet, tell us about your editing process a little bit.
I love editing. I love it. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go on, tell me about your editing.
I said I'd love to hear about your editing process. Seems very particular.
Yeah, it is. I said no manipulation, and that's true. I do, however, crop. I'm not sure whether that counts as manipulation, but be that as it may, I do. And I, particularly during that year of COVID, boy, every day I would come back home with what I thought of as not the crop of cropping, but a crop as in a harvest of photographs. And, I would look through them. I would decide if anything was worth it. I'd print them out on my home printer. I would slide them if I thought they were, and slide them. I would put them into first iPhoto and now both iPhoto since it's discontinued and photo. And then I'd move them around and I'd place them with other photographs. I would juxtapose. And then there would be the real question, is this a keeper? Maybe before that I would be cropping, but I don't ask the question, is it a keeper? What I do is something that somebody here who is listening or seeing told me many, many years ago, and that's Joanne Callis. She said, one can put the picture around, no big deal, on a table, anywhere, on a sofa, whatever. Well, sofa wouldn't be very convenient, but wherever. And give it time and see if your eye goes to it again and again. And if it does, it's probably something you should look at more intently. So I do that. And then I think about whether it's a keeper in a lot of other senses, because I'm always looking for the more in the image. The more that isn't, when I say isn't simply the image, not that images are simple, but layers, levels of meaning. So all of that is sheer unadulterated pleasure. I have been heard to say that writing is the furrowed brow, as in this one, it's just, it just is difficult. I've done it all my life, but it is a furrowed brow. Whereas in photography, there's just quite a lot of joy for me. And a lot of that joy is in the editing process.
Yes. We have a question here in the Q&A from Gary Ridgewald. Would you please explain how you take the picture? The one you shared at the end, having the tree in the front and the wall behind. I'm not sure which image is being referenced here, but maybe if you could just more detail of the how you take a picture.
Well, I'd like to point to a quality of mystery that people, I think, don't talk enough about. It's the quality of accident and intention. and where the one and where the other. That picture was in Mexico, where I go as often as I can. It was at the most fantastically beautiful hour of light, as you can see. And of course, I framed it. Of course, I composed it. Of course, all those things. But then that other thing seeped in. I think that's really kind of a good word, which does make it that translucence. And at first I thought, well, you know, that's accident. But those kinds of things, not literally that thing, have happened for so long, for so many times. I've actually come to believe that maybe there is a neurological unconscious that knows what you're doing even when you don't know what you're doing. And this is something that when I said there were going to be things happening at Rose's Gallery on November 14th, one of them is I'm going to be chatting with the neurologist neurobiologist and author Antonio Damasio. And I really want to ask him that question about accident, intention. What do we know without knowing?
Right. Lovely. That's a good place for us to kind of pin this as well, Janet. I think that's a good next segue to thanking you for your presentation. I want to let everyone know in the chat really quickly, I will add a few links that Janet has provided us. And yeah, I want to pass it back to you, Janet, for any final thoughts or points that you'd like to make.
Well, what I'm trying to do right this moment is capture the chat, because chat goes away as the image goes away. And I want to look if I can see anything that I would like to continue, because you were very good at catching. Says check the Q&A for another Q.
Yes, that's another question. That's my team letting me know.
Tell me, okay, I'm going to get rid of the chat, and you could tell me that other question as a way of saying farewell.
Oh, actually, there's a second question here, and it's from the same person. He asked if you could show the image one more time that he referenced, the one with the tree in the front and the wall behind. Yes, it was possible.
Well, I'm going to hope I can. This has to do with going to share screen. I hope I still have select all on. So I'm sharing it. And then I go to this. Yep. And there, no, I went to Zoom. Is anybody seeing anything than my Zoom page? Well, let's go forward and see. No, not working. No.
I think you just got to click in the.
Wait. I am going to go into the actual image because they're no longer selected. I'm going to see if I can pull it out. Oh, here they are selected. Am I going to get there? Well, here we go. The translucent world, which is pictures as images go. Titles go, that's not very good. Here, I'm going to just take, there, I got it. Did you see it? It went by very fast.
There it is.
There it is.
Yes. Thank you.
This is so recent. Yeah, really, thank you for that. And this is so recent that it's, you know how an image, all of you know this, can kind of go dead in the water. No, not this one. This feels very alive. And I'm very glad to see it. And I think it would be a lovely one to end with. What do you think, Bailey?
I think absolutely. And Gary, thank you for engaging this image further. It's wonderful. And it's a part of your newer work, right, Janet?
Oh yeah. This is like maybe 2 months ago, if that. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, exciting what you have coming, Janet. We look forward to keeping up.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes, and joining you at Rose's for your talk that's forthcoming in November.
Well, as Rose always does, she sends out a notice and we'll have an RSVP. And if you're thinking of doing it, do RSVP, because I know that there isn't that much room there. And
absolutely.
Whatever.
Yes. All right, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, everybody.